Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining my session. I know it was very exciting to join me after Google, so if you stuck around, thank you so much. If you are new, thank you for coming. My name is Chris Boehm. I'm a technology strategist. What that is, in case you're curious, I work across the whole entire company here at SentinelOne. It could be business operation, merger and acquisition, marketing, sales. It doesn't really matter. I'm somewhere in that conversation at one point. My history, why listen to me maybe? I worked at Microsoft for about 7 years. I've started on the debugging of the operating system, deep kernel. I was that guy who, hey, a blue screen happened, why? And I can say this is the reason. And then the last things I was working on before I left Microsoft was working on the latest security platform today as their Microsoft security solution. So you can just name it. I probably touched it in some form or fashion on the engineering side. So that's what I was doing before I left Microsoft. And I've been at SentinelOne for about almost a year now, give or take. So what I'm going to be talking about here, just to be transparent, this is not a marketing thing. There's maybe 2 slides that talks about we did buy a company called Ativo, but the main things we're going to be talking about is identity risk. This is a high-level presentation, more thought leadership and engagement. So if you're here for a technical deep dive of why this is happening, how we're attacking, I go of very high level, a low level attack demonstration. So don't expect anything too complicated here, but I wanted to be able to be a little transparent. And we did acquire a company called Ativo, so this is our new adoption of this company into our platform. So if you're kind of curious why all these things coming from, it's because of the Ativo acquisition here at SentinelOne. So talking about the problem and solution is just kind of a fun illustration. This is a threat researcher group that just posts on Twitter. So of course, you can always find all the fun stuff on Twitter, what happened recently. The main thing I wanted to call out here was a lot of it is around Active Directory. They say, I don't know why Daniel put it this way, hopefully he's not in this room, but the way he put it is we pretend we know we know how to, I've read this so many times, you think I know it by heart by now. We pretend we know how to do it, but the fact is it continues to be that pig with lipstick that no one cares is secure and attackers easy find themselves to own the environment, and it's usually Active Directory that gets them in. This is even a quote from Nick Bennett here at Mandiant VP. In virtually every significant ransomware case, identity is part of the story. So you can feel free to take a screenshot. This is all public. It's nothing scary, but it's just more the fact that identity is always part of the conversation when a breach occurs in most of the organizations today. So just kind of giving some security facts, like this is not SentinelOne's information. This is other sources. So this one's IDSA, for example. They say organizations that had a breach last year, this is 2022, 84% of them had identity-related information associated to them. The next one is, this is IBM's, just the cost of a breach around identity stolen credentials. The average cost is about 4.5 million. So just kind of showing why this is a growing trend for a lot of companies today, is identity is, hey, we need to provide more security, part of our solutions. And you can see a lot of different companies out there are acquiring identity companies or merging or partnering up very closely because it's part of a strong story that's needed today. So just talking about some challenges, why these companies are evolving, and just like ourselves here at SentinelOne. One of them is the rapid expanse of organizations. They're moving across different, either expanding their company, they could be adding new personnel. You can have a school district that's adding 20,000 students. It could be a quarter. It's ridiculous how fast they're adding so many different user identity information, and it's just constantly changing their posture and how they should handle it with a skeleton crew. So it becomes very hard for these companies to maintain the identity hygiene around it, which I'll talk about in a minute. Then it goes to the cloud environments. I don't know if anyone's ever done attack simulations on an on-prem to a cloud environment. I've done that myself. It was one of the things I was doing at Microsoft. And it's actually not that hard. If you have a domain controller, you steal credentials, you leverage those credentials, and then you can gain access into a cloud environment based on your ADFS token. Surprisingly simple if you've ever done it before. But attackers are taking advantage of that, taking advantage of loopholes, and then gaining access to APIs that's on the cloud platform. So it's something kind of scary that, of course, these big platforms like Microsoft and other AWS, GCP are aware of, and they take actions and provide visibility for you. But it is something that it is a growing concern around identity specifically. Another one is attackers are evolving, kind of like the example I gave. One of the solutions I decided to build when I was at Microsoft is to show from a product perspective how quickly and easy you can deploy an attack simulation and attack your environment. So I did it on the Microsoft side, just to kind of give an example. I was able to do a full ADFS compromise through a DevOps pipeline in 30 minutes. That means I gained access from a domain controller, deployed the machines, stole the credentials, brute forced it, did the normal way, gained access to the cloud environment, and I was able to gain access to a cloud API token that allowed me to do whatever I wanted in the environment through the ADFS token specifically. So it's pretty cool what you can do, but if I can do that, attackers can do the same thing. So that's what I was demonstrating and showing as a product engineering side. This is what we need to be able to fix and address. And then this is, unfortunately, the sad story, is a lot of our hygiene is not the best when it comes to identity. It's not uncommon for developers. I had this conversation all the time. The developer would say, hey, I want to be able to deploy something. I need full access in order to do this. And I'm like, OK, what does full access mean to you? Do you have to own the whole entire environment to deploy your application? Well, I don't know. Well, what is your application doing? So you have this weird conversation with the developer that wants to just get their job done. They have timelines. That's just one example. But unfortunately, this happens all the time when it comes to business operations. They just quickly adapt, just try to give you access, move forward, and you have this poor hygiene and a lot of escalated privileges for no reason. And then the last one is privilege identity management issues. It's the impact of business. It happens all the time, unfortunately, and it's a lot of noise for your security teams. I don't know how many times I had conversations while I've had impossible travels, I have conditional access issues, it just goes on and on around your privilege identity management, and it creates a noise for operations and businesses themselves, and they just don't want to move forward. So, and that causes conflict around identity security challenges specifically. So kind of going forward with how things are today and how things are evolving, your typical endpoint protection platform, that's your preventing mimikatz from occurring on your machine, preventing misuse of credentials, preventing stealing of information. That's where your EDR, EPP comes in. And then you have your identity access management platform that limits access based on network visibility or conditional configurations, whatever is necessary. That works too, but it doesn't always provide the full context and story of what's happening from an attack vector. So neither of these are usually significant when the full overflow, and that's why identity security is growing as itself. And that's why we're adding more compromised information of what an identity user is doing, preventing that from even occurring, and then taking action before an attack could even occur. We want to stop it earlier, which I'll give you a demonstration just in a minute. Am I going too fast for people? Just checking? Nope. By the way, this presentation, it's about 20, 25 minutes, so it should be easy questions and answers if you want to, or have a little longer break. So this is the typical identity protection landscape today. If you're familiar with these terms, there's identity governance, there's identity access management, and privilege access management. I threw in some company names because those are just what they're really known for. For example, Okta and Azure Active Directory with IAM, and that's like single sign-on, multi-factor authentication. You have your identity governance, that's your requests of access, enablement, entitlement provisioning. And then you have your privileged access management. That's like just-in-time capabilities to have access into a server or whatever's necessary or application, and having least privilege access ideally. Now, what you're going to have ideally next to this is the identity risk assessment. So you have a score system. You provide what's happening in your environment. Is it an application that's not configured correctly? Does these users have too many privileges? Is there something wrong or misused in your organization? And then you have the ability to respond and detect and remediate as quickly as possible to these advanced what's happening in your environment. So ideally, you have the capability to respond. If someone was using administrative privileges and doing something odd, we can respond and say, hey, this is not what should be happening, and we can notify the security team, and this is the best practice, and then we can talk about follow-up actions or just block it altogether, depending on what the situation is. So just talking about our risk assessment, this is, like I kind of mentioned, it's exposing the passwords. It has what could be potentially taken advantage of on the endpoint perspective. It's really around Active Directory or Azure Active Directory exposures and vulnerabilities, including possibly cloud vulnerabilities of those API and applications. So that's what our risk assessment side is. It's just saying, here's what's going on. It kind of gives you that score system that everyone looks for, like where can I move the needle so I'm more secure from an identity standpoint. And then we have the ITDR, which is Identity Threat and Detection Response. This prevents the misuse of those escalated privileges, prevents lateral movement. It saves and stores and prevents people from messing with those tokens that are stored on a machine. Because if you log into a Windows platform, that token is there and it can be taken advantage of today. So it could be a Surface account running in the background. We want to make sure it stays and does what it's supposed to do, but an attacker doesn't take advantage of it, for example. So that's why this is being offered as a solution. By the way, this does not replace, that's why I added that line item. It does not remove single sign-on or multi-factor authentication. You still need it as part of your story. It's just an evolution of what more visibility you can have for a security team and simplified it into the same platform ideally. So this is that kind of high-level presentation I was going to talk about of where an attacker would come in and what you would have visibility to. So from a just showing you from an identity standpoint, you can see what the user is doing on the workstation. You can see if they have Azure Active Directory access or they have just local domain access, what groups they're associated to, are those groups have too much privilege, for example, or they have enough, what applications on-prem they have access to, and specific file storage and access management. So if you have all your databases and everything in a specific sector that you don't need these users ever to access, you can make sure you set that up right. So that's ideally, it shows you what this user is doing, shows a comprehensive story, and walks them through it. So it's not just on the on-prem side, but even on a hybrid or cloud side if necessary. Now, these are just typical attack paths. I kind of talked about it as if you've logged in onto a Windows machine, for example, your credentials have been stored. Even if you can go around a multi-factor authentication, that attack simulation I was talking about earlier, I had MFA enabled, I still gain cloud access. Just takes the token, that's all it needs. Taking advantage of duplicate credentials or delegated administrative accounts that's on the machine, same thing, it prevents that kind of attack path for endpoints. And then, of course, you hear these key terms. I'm not going to explain all of them, but it would actually prevent and not allow these things to happen, like a golden ticket, a DC sync, pass the hash, pass the ticket, and recon and surface accounts and skeleton keys and so on and so forth. So that's what the service is providing on an endpoint level and Active Directory level. So it's protecting both your endpoint and your domain controller, and even it monitors what happens in the cloud for you as well. So just to kind of give a visual aid of a typical attack pattern today, and walking through it. The idea is to prevent this faster. Today, if someone comes in, we have the ability of saying, okay, I have my endpoint, my EDR solution on my laptop. They've gained access to my laptop, and they say, hey, here's Mimikatz. Boom, we blocked it. Great. The problem is attackers are getting smarter than that. What if they run Mimikatz in memory, and you can't see that? So you move into the next thing. Okay, well, we're going to provide detection mechanics and provide some behavioral analytics, and we see something that is occurring that mimics that capability. Like, why are they reaching out to certain websites or certain, they're running certain commands in the background that we can actually see through a PowerShell script. That's where your behavioral AI comes in and stops it. Fantastic. Now we can potentially stop that again. Now we can even take remediation on it. We can take action from a security team. This is what we need to do to prevent this from happening in the future. And then we can even validate it with our third-party API integrations. So we can say, hey, we can notice Okta did say there's some weird sign-ons. We can notice Zscaler was disabled, whatever we want to do, and they were accessing some things that we didn't want them to access on the cloud. So that's the typical attack approach. Ideally, we shipped it way earlier that none of this ever happened. And we said, hey, why are they even running Mimikatz in the first place? So we prevent them from running anything from an escalated privilege perspective, even if it is in memory, and this is what this action will do. It won't even let them run that application in the first place because they didn't get the capability of doing that in the first place. So that's kind of the goal of adopting our identity threat detection and response in our platform. So this is the marketing slide I promised you guys about. This is from the acquisition of Attivo and with our Singularity solution. Kind of walking through what I was mentioning. So our Ranger AD, this is your hygiene environment. It scans your network infrastructure. It scans your on-prem AD, your domain controller. It scans your ADFS. It gives you visibility and says, this is what's going on in your environment. Is it secure? Is there assessments that need to be addressed and taken care of? And this is what you should potentially do moving forward. Then we have our identity solution. That is what I was just talking about earlier. Prevents, responds, detects, and takes action on malicious activities that a user should not be doing in their environment. This is probably the neatest one. And we actually worked with MITRE recently on this one. It's our hologram program, which is our deception. I don't know if anyone's heard of the new deception tactics recently. That's allowing you to be able to act like, it's like a honeypot capability in your environment that allows an attacker to kind of seep in there. Everyone's familiar with honeypots. They've been talked about for years. But this is actually built into our platform for you. So it allows an attacker to say, hey, I've gained access, I moved privileges, and I moved over, and there's a domain controller I have access to. It's all fake data. It's quite incredible. They just go in there, do queries, gather information. We've deployed this for some customers, and they're like, oh, this is amazing. We did our assessment. We're protecting ourselves. And all of a sudden, someone's in their domain controller that's a fake domain controller. And they're like, oh, there's actually someone in our environment. That's because it allows them to run queries and everything. So it seems like a real domain controller and access management that they we're able to catch an attacker in their environment. So it's a pretty neat concept. It's something that's relatively new in the security space, other than the fact it's being integrated into a solution like ours and like some others. So that's a pretty neat one that we're providing within our Singularity platform. So I don't know if anyone in here joined my XDR talk yesterday. Was anyone there? I don't think so. I don't see any familiar faces. So this is maybe not necessarily a repeat for you. That's great. The main thing from an XDR solution, so you keep hearing these terms and terminology around XDR, is there's multiple different pillars to it, at least on our standpoint, and a lot of them are the same way. Our concentrations are endpoint, cloud, and identity. So when I talk about endpoint, I'm talking about my iPhone, my Android devices, my Chromebooks, my Linux machines, my Windows machines, and my MacBooks. So any device has the capability of knowing what's going on in that device. It has the capability of responding to that and at mass scale. And I'm not talking 100 machines. I'm talking potentially tens of thousands of machines of automation remediation, so your security team is fast and efficient. So that's our endpoint security solution. And then we have the cloud visibility. The EDR part, the endpoint protection, just mirror that on our cloud. It works from virtual machines to Kubernetes workloads, and it has the same scope of visibility and remediation. Phenomenal product, and it works very frictionless and very easy. And then we have our identity solution that I've been talking about this whole entire time that provides that whole entire holistic story from what the user's doing, do you have the appropriate hygiene, and then you, of course, can remediate and respond to it with our deception capabilities built into the solution. So as overall, that's our XDR story. We're providing the context of all of this on a single agent, single platform experience. So you don't have to deploy another agent. You don't have to work with other things. You just have it on your endpoint. The endpoint will even talk to the domain controller if necessary and figure all of it out for you. So it provides a holistic story for your security team. Now, this is my last slide. So this is the low-hanging fruit. This is what you should take away from this session if you learned anything at all. The first one is, ideally, you're supposed to be being a little more proactive in response to this attack situation. So kind of like what I was talking about earlier, bring it way to the left, allow the attacker to not have access and do things in the environment, prevent that from even occurring in the first place. So that's why identity security is jumping to the gun as a forefront in our cybersecurity platform. And not to mention, we have the next part is the integration with all those other solutions that I talked about. From there, we move into the complete visibility. I want to be able to say, from a security analyst point of view, that here's everything that's happening. It doesn't matter if it's just with the three I was talking about. I want to be able to see my Okta. I want to see Zscaler. I want to see all those other solutions I was just talking about in the same kind of story context, which works with the next one, the easy native integrations, that open marketplace solutions. Everyone's used to marketplaces, especially since if you have an iPhone or an Android device, I just click add, I can now have access. Same thing here, just simple API token, you have access, and now you can validate from a security platform perspective and validate from a security analyst point of view. The next one is the quick response capabilities. You really want a platform that takes action, remediates, and it empowers your security team. It shouldn't be something that's requiring lots of time to remediate and take action on the platform itself. It should be working for you. And the last one is the reducing the complexity. The main thing around here is a lot of tools you have to specialize, work on, be skilled in order to use it. The tool itself should be educating you throughout the whole entire security adventure itself. So if you had the ability to just say, I installed, I added it, and now I have a college grad student looking at the solution, it should educate them and make them feel empowered, not the other way around, where they have to feel like, okay, who do I need to call now to figure out what's really going on this page? So that's the main thing here, reducing complexity, enrich it, have minor integrations, have story context, and make your lives a lot easier. And it works from MSSP side to even a college student, it doesn't matter. And that is all I had for you guys. Thank you so much. I will answer any questions and answers if you guys have any. And that is all I have for my presentation. Any questions? I know that was really a lot in 20 minutes. I apologize. I summarized it, trust me. One question, yes.
So I have a quick question.
Sure.
The agent. I'm sorry. On the agent, is it the same agent that you deploy on a regular endpoint and also on Active Directory or a domain controller?
So and that's why I made the comment. Yeah, you're right. I know there's a lot of platforms out there today that requires a separate agent, even scales it and understands what the domain controller offers. This one is going to be the same agent. So yeah, you do not have to have another agent on the platform, which is huge. We're really proud of that. It was a requirement for us at SentinelOne to make sure it was a single agent if we did acquire a company. So that's one reason we went with the TiVo specifically. Yeah, good question though, because it's the question I asked too. Do we have to have another agent? The answer is no. So. Any other questions I can answer for anyone? I just blew you all away. I'm so proud of myself. Well, thank you guys again. If you want, you can even come up and talk to me. I'll hang out for a few minutes. And it was a pleasure again working with all of you and presenting this information. So thanks.